Welcome back to Focus Today. Steve Johnson here with you, and our guest is a guy you've seen on theDove TV every now and then. We try to air it early in the morning, but also late in the afternoon. It's Wretched TV. Todd Friel is our guest today for a couple of segments, and we are going to look at all things political and apparently recycling. Todd Friel is big in recycling. I can tell by the papers that he's holding up that he's got some recyclables. No doubt about that, and a very nice gold ring, too. Todd, how are you doing?
You noticed?
I guess the budget is so cheap that as opposed to the Tonight Show where they had a curtain that you'd actually walk through, you have some papers that you quickly move away in. There's Todd.
This is a fascinating set of articles that I'm holding in my midst. Evangelical Christianity appears to be a wee bit divided on the presidential election. And some of the articles that are flying around the internet, zoinks, Scoob.
Wow. You know, I think some of us have been wondering about that for some time now, and that's why I'm glad we have you on, because I want to talk about that idea. Let's go back into the deep, dark history annals of the 1980s, where we had the moral majority, and whether or not it was totally unified, there was a feeling that there was some coalescing of thought among evangelicals. I don't know that everybody voted the way that Jerry Falwell wanted them to, but it seemed like it was kind of there. I'm not getting the feeling we have anything like that now, but I haven't thought of that we've had that for some time now. So you're saying these articles are finally saying, oh, it's not quite as tight as what some people had thought, perhaps? I don't know that any of us thought that it was.
That. Now, the statistics that I've seen range from 92% of evangelicals are going to vote for Trump, whether they like it or not. But I have also seen about 75 to 78% are pro-Trump, and about 25% of evangelicals are saying, no way. That's big. But, Steve, my bigger consideration in all of this is how are we talking to one another when we disagree on politics? Because the subtext, and sometimes it's just right in your face, the dialogue between evangelicals, you would think that we were talking about the doctrine of the Trinity or the sufficiency of Scripture, where you put up your dukes and you fight for that. We're talking about the realm of politics in a representative republic. The Bible does not have a specific verse that says this is precisely for whom you should vote. You shouldn't, you should endorse, you shouldn't criticize. The Bible gives us instruction. The challenge is the application, and different Christians are concluding different things about for whom to vote. And that's okay, because I think this falls into a territory that we call adiaphora. These are disputable dispensations. They're middle things. They're gray areas where different Christians should be able to disagree without saying one another.
You've hit on something I think that's key right there. I think some people are they don't want to get in any kind of a dialogue because they actually, first of all, might have to think about making a decision. But secondly, I might say something that would offend somebody else, that somebody disagrees with, and at all cost, we will not discuss something that has a controversy to it. Do you think this is the essence? We're supposed to be in this kumbaya movement and moment and not have anything that would divide us, possibly, and so people just run away?
Yeah, if that's the goal, I don't think it's being met, because, I don't read everything on the internet, who possibly could, but it seems that people are more than willing to say, you're going to vote for whom? You're a problem. You're wrong. You're terrible. You don't know what you're talking about. You need to read your Bible. So if we're supposed to be kumbaya-ing, I'm not so sure that we are.
Well, okay, so, and we hear about this sometimes because, we'll make some statements here at the station, and some people will talk about saying, well, I don't know, I don't like to get into politics, as if it is something where it's a land you don't move into without realizing, wait a minute, everything that deals with politics has to do with moral choices. Moral choices have to do with what you stand for. What you stand for is what you believe in, and what you believe in is what the Bible is all about. And yet there seems to be this detachment where we don't follow those key points right there. Is this the basic problem, do you think, that we're just not willing to make a decision because we'd rather just be with somebody in a happy moment and not discuss any of these bad things? Because I know some people who, they say we will not talk about anything political without realizing the moral implications.
Yeah, this politics is a realm that we need to recognize is an institution from God. Good governments, bad governments are put in place by God himself, Romans 13, and we are to submit to these governments. Now, the question is, what is the role of government? Biblically, it's really one chore. Protect people from evildoers so that we can go about our business. That's all that God says that the government should be doing. But here's the tricky part. The reality is we live in a government that does far more than what God gives them the responsibility to handle. So now we can analyze the realm of government and ask a question. What is the government effecting? What does it do out there? Does it help people? Does it hurt people? Because if it's acting as a moral agent, which it is, as a Christian, I can now look at politics, as distasteful as I might find it, and say, that is a realm in which I am willing to enter, whether I like it or not, because my compassion demands it, because good things can come from this government and evil can come from this government. And if I can have a little small voice in it and participate a little bit so that I love my neighbor, trying to do the most good to the most people through a government institution, I see it as an act, frankly, of compassion.
Okay, so how did we get to this situation that we have to kind of reinvent the whole discussion of religion, if I can even use that term, morality and politics? Let me put it in those terms. What has broken down? Is it something that Christians don't realize this is part of what you signed up for? Is it that the churches don't want to deal with this? I mean, I think once we find where that is, we might be able to work back from there. But where do you think this originated from? Because it doesn't seem like it was always like this.
Yeah, I think it originated from one of the oldest religions in the world, the religion of secular humanism. They're just winning the argument. They're winning the day. They're winning the statistics and the polls with progressive ideology, godless thinking. Secular humanism has influenced us to be mum, zip it, don't talk about your faith, it shouldn't be public, and it most certainly shouldn't be in politics. And so we look back to Thomas Jefferson and the letter to the Baptist Church to create an unconstitutional doctrine called separation of church and state, at least a correct understanding of that. So I think secular humanism, for the most part, has caused evangelicals to be mum. Now, having said that, when we enter into the realm of politics, how do we do that? My concern is if we are merely talking like politicians, then we've lost our saltiness, we've lost our brightness, and we've lost our mission. Because when we enter into the realm of politics, we don't want to do it as a special interest group or as lobbyists. We want to do it as Christians. So if our message sounds a lot like Sean Hannity's, we might, even though it's right, might want to consider, what am I speaking to this institution about? Politics only or the Bible?
You know, now that's interesting, because what that comes into mind is what we've seen generationally with millennials who avoid confrontation, but they definitely have opinions about what they believe. And I think you're right. If one were to, and I don't want to beat up on Sean Hannity, but he is very vocal and very strained. Yeah, and what he's saying. And that's not the way that you would think two people having a cup of coffee at their favorite coffee house would discuss something like this.
No.
And I'm thinking also parents and kids. The parents are looking at it saying, you know, I don't know how my child, we didn't talk about these things and what direction they've gone. Maybe it was in college or whatever that way. But I think the millennial generation really concerns me in exactly what you're saying, because I'm thinking this could be a lost generation if we can't turn this discussion around to what you're talking about. I'm just wondering how we go about doing it. I think it's got to be one-on-one, really, right? We don't have any national speaker at this point who can talk like that, do we?
Well, you know, they drag out some different evangelicals and they put them on the air. Some do better than others, frankly. For instance, regularly I'll hear Franklin Graham. He brings it back to the gospel. He brings it back to theology and what the Bible says. We need to be the people who lovingly speak the truth, and instead of saying, this is what the Republican platform states, or this is what the latest poll, survey, and scientific research has determined, we say, this is what God says. So when we speak on all of these issues, we need to be thinking like Christians and speaking like disciples, and not merely as politicians. And for instance, these are some of the articles that are out there. This is the big one that caused the brouhaha right here. This is from Town Hall. Do you know who Wayne Grudem is, Steve?
I've seen his title, but I couldn't tell you that much about him.
You see it on everybody's bookshelf. Wayne Grudem has been teaching theology for 39 years. His systematic theology textbook is a staple amongst evangelicals. You might disagree with this or that, but otherwise it is a very good book and a great piece of work, and he's well respected. So he wrote this article, Why Voting for Donald Trump is a Morally Good Choice. That's his take on it, all right? These responses. Why Wayne Grudem is wrong about Trump. A good man justifies a wicked deed. Grudem on Trump. And people went after Wayne Grudem, and that's okay. We disagree about that. It's okay. But can we do it with a tone? And most of these two articles did, I think, respectfully. Can we follow that pattern when we talk to not just liberals, progressives, but when we talk to one another? Can we do it with an understanding that different Christians are going to come up with a different conclusion? And Steve, this is so practical because this happens a lot. When we fail to identify what an issue is, I'll hear an announcement from the church pulpit. I know exactly what to think about that because it's the first thought that pops into my brain. It gets entrenched, and that's the way to do it because it's me, and I had the thought. So when I fail to remember that other people maybe have that same sort of attitude, they came up with a different conclusion, they're convinced that they're right, I need to recognize when it's a gray area issue, I might actually be the one who's wrong here. And so I don't act stridently. I act lovingly. We should be doing it with the world, and we should be doing it with one another. That, to me, there are people that are concerned. If you vote for Trump, the moral authority of evangelical Christianity evaporates. I get that. I understand, because the world could look at it and say, wow, the guy's a gambler and a philanderer. He was divorced, the casinos, and they vote for a guy. Yeah, who are those evangelicals? And those articles are being written. I get that. I understand the concern, but I think that we will undermine the testimony of the gospel even more if we are like this when it comes to the issue. Do you vote for Trump? Do you do a write-in? Do you stay at home? For whom should you vote? It should be far more loving, because otherwise I do think it undermines our testimony.
Yeah. Todd Friel's with us, a host of Wretched TV that you see on the Dove TV here. I'm glad you brought up Franklin Graham. Thank you very much. I think you're right. I've been pleasantly surprised at how he has come out in a loving way, but very direct way, about what he believes. It surprised me when I saw the first of those, because I just thought he was going to be more like his father, who was pretty neutral on a lot of these things, though you knew where he stood. But he's made quite a stand. Here's what I'd like to do. Since you talked about speaking like a disciple as opposed to like a politician, we're going to take a break, and you've got 2 minutes to come up with a methodology on how people can talk, how parents can talk to their kids, their millennials, who might have been walking down this path of secular humanism, and how they can change them around 180 degrees. You got 2 minutes. I know that Todd's been thinking about this anyway. We didn't talk about this, but I know that it's right there, right in the the front lobal part of the brain there. So I don't want to put you on the hot seat there, but I know that you've got some ideas. You must, because you always do. So we're going to be back with Todd Friel and talk about how we can be more like a disciple during this heated political area, especially as you're talking maybe your kids, your grandkids, maybe your best friend. I've had people who have defriended me on Facebook, who I've known for years because of something that was said that I didn't think was inflammatory. So we will get back to this coming up in about 2 minutes. Todd, start writing. Todd Friel, our guest here on Focus today.
I'm Paulina Leiser, producer of Focus Today. Thank you for watching this video, and make sure to check our other videos at theDove.us.
Welcome back to Focus Today. Steve Johnson here with you, along with Todd Friel from Wretched TV that you see right here on the Dove. Todd, it's great to have you here, and you hit on something as we're talking about this, the tenor of this political season and how people are perhaps getting off track in discussing the real important things, because it's going to end up in the voting that happens this November. And I've talked to a lot of people who might have kids, grandkids, maybe friends who end up detaching from them because of some of these political discussions, Hillary versus Donald and all this. And we see it on Facebook a lot, and that seems to be where people just kind of blanch out with a momentary thought, and there it is, and then it's responded to and all the rest. You talked about how we need to talk to each other more like a discipleship, more like brothers and sisters, really, rather than politicians who are trying to make a point. So do you have some thoughts on how this discussion can be started? Because I don't expect to have all the solutions, but how can we move towards more of this civil discourse about what really is important?
Yeah, it's interesting with millennials. They are an interesting group of folks. We're actually doing a new TV series called Untethered about this particular generation. Their thinking is extremely postmodern, but it's also had an impact on conservative Christian kids. And it sounds like this. Yeah, like homosexuality, it's a sin, but whatever. They have much more of a, let's just not make a big deal out of this. This is my personal conviction, but I don't want to make a stink about it. That is the attitude of millennial Christian kids. So they've got the right theology, but their attitude seems to be different than their parents' attitude. And what we're seeing too, and I think the statistic is frightening, 60 to 80% of our kids are getting somewhat indoctrinated or entertained in a silly youth group, either one. 60 to 80% run off to university or tech school or just leave the nest, and they backslide. Something is going on here that's different. And if we as parents can figure out how to speak to them, to, I'm going to say a scary word these days, indoctrinate them, we will do well in helping our kids understand the importance of these issues, believe these issues, and apply these issues. And one of the ways I think we can do that, and this might be a radical readjustment of your parenting outlook and your trajectory and how you deal with your kids, instead of being the parent who says, "Thus saith me," we need to be instructing our kids constantly with "Thus saith the Lord." Because here's what happens, Steve. If we tell our kids, "Hey, abortion is terrible, gay marriage, it's horrible for people, and the religious liberties are under threat, and they want to take away our guns." Okay, I agree with all of that, but who's the authority? Mom and dad. Now, that doesn't mean you're not the authority, but we ultimately want kids submitting to the superior authority that we submit to, and that is God. So when we talk about the life issue, instead of just saying it's terrible what they do to the kids in the womb, you take them to Psalm 139. You take them to Jeremiah 1. You show them that babies are knit together by God in the womb. They're precious. You take them to Genesis 2 and 3. They're image bearers of Almighty God, and we don't snuff out a life of an image bearer. And by doing that, our kids learn that these thoughts, these beliefs, our traditions do not just come from us or from our grandparents. They come from God through the Word. So if you want your kid to stay on the same trajectory that you're on, loving Jesus, rightly applying the word of truth, use the Bible as your authority as you instruct your children.
You know, that's a great point, because I think too often we go to the issue of the day, like you pointed out, abortion. Oh, it's a terrible thing. We're culling all that information that you mentioned from our past, bringing it out in a very brief form of a summary, rather than having that ongoing conversation that we should have been having with the kids anyway about that whole thing. Because you're right, if you talk about being knit in the womb, do you really have to make an issue now about the problems of abortion? I mean, you're showing the importance of that life. It's the most basic of civil rights if you want to get in that path. But we seem to go towards the conclusion before we build up our case, it seems.
Look, it's easy to do. You're having a conversation at the dinner table. How's about Kate Jenner, Bruce Jenner, and the bathroom business? What's this world come to? And, you know, the kids, they pick that up. They get that. But who's the authority? Why should they agree with you? Who's the arbiter in disputes? So when we talk about bathroom issues, politics, the life issue, whatever it is, root your teaching, ground it in the authority of the word. Thus saith the Lord, not just thus saith dad and mom.
Your expectations as we're getting close to the election coming up, who do you think of evangelicals?
Yeah, Steve, go ahead. Can I jump in just for a second?
Yeah.
I mean, sorry, I think this is so important for moms and dads. This isn't just in talking about the big issues like politics and life and all of those things. Everything. Why should they clean their room? Why should they mow the lawn with straight lines and not leave it a mess? Because if we're just barking, clean your room, it's a pigsty up there. Hey, mow the lawn. Come on, man. Straight lines. Let's look sharp out there. Okay. We're teaching them they need to submit to us. Bring a Bible verse. Sit down. I know it takes work and it takes time, and not every encounter requires a 3-point sermon. But we need to explain the theology behind clean rooms, the theology behind don't chew with your mouth closed. We need to teach the theology behind why do we do the traditions that we do. Otherwise, the kids, they leave our authority and they write their own rules. If you can start thinking, all right, I'm not parenting anymore, I'm discipling. I'm trying to instruct the fear and the admonition of the Lord. They submit unto us as in the Lord. That will radically change the way you speak to your children, and it will give them a reason to submit to something much bigger than you. It is transforming if you can start thinking like that as a parent.
And I'm getting the idea that between now and the election, this isn't too late to even start down that path if you haven't had those discussions. It could be transforming, I suppose, for what's going to be happening.
Yeah, and there's so many opportunities. Use Donald Trump as a lesson as to how to not act like a godly man. But don't do it just by saying, he's so bombastic. He lies. Okay, if we just make those observations, use Donald Trump, use Hillary Clinton, use Gary Johnson to say, all right, let's figure out what's going on there biblically so that our kids start thinking biblically, because otherwise they're submitting to us and not to God, and that's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. You know, I think that a lot of parents listening to this will be saying there's a lot of work that has to be done to get back to that point. And I think that you probably are hitting on things that people are saying, well, we should have had these ongoing discussions all the time anyway.
Not too late.
Yeah, it's not too late, though. You're right. And really, what you're discussing, I think, is far more important than just this election. This has to do with everything that they're going to believe for the rest of their life, who their partner is that they're going to choose in marriage, and how they're going to raise their kids and everything else. So I think very good points.
Okay,
Anything else in closing?
Here's another example.
Yeah.
Guns.
Okay.
Every time the mass shooting happens, we have a conversation about gun laws. Now, here is the typical, including my evangelical response.
Got 20 seconds.
Don't take away my Second Amendment rights.
Yeah.
Keep your hands off of my guns. Okay, I think that's the right position. Why? Why is not constitutionally? That's interesting. Biblically, why do we see mass shootings? Who is the culpable moral agent in a mass shooting? Is it an inanimate object that you simply shoot, or is it the one who's pulling the trigger?
Okay, Todd, I am sorry.
These issues biblically.
I've got about 5 seconds. Thank you. I appreciate it. I want to continue this discussion. Todd Friel here on Focus Today. Thanks for being here.